this is Sarabjeet. You are watching this video in Business Analyst in Demand Facebook group or on YouTube, Business Analyst in Demand. This is a Facebook group as well as a YouTube channel that in which we discuss various topics within the business analyst domain. Today's training will be focused on a case study, which we started about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Today is week 6 of the topic. I had many requests in the group saying that, we're now required to do case studies for interviews, and we really don't know an approach to doing case studies. So I focused for the past few weeks training on helping you guys think through the process, because it's not really just what they're looking for as deliverables. They're wanting to see a thought process, an analytical thought process for you to present to them either in your interview or documentation for their projects, right? So we spent the last 5 weeks talking about various topics within the business analyst domain, which typically you would do if you were working as a business analyst, or if you're transitioning into a business analyst, or you're a new business analyst, or you're working as a business analyst. These are things that we do in the day-to-day domain anyway. And in this case studies, I like to say, are the land of make-believe, which means that we're really not talking to stakeholders as input, which typically you would do if you were working in the real world scenario. In this, when we're working on case studies, we try to make assumptions and we try to do the best we can with the information that we're given so that we can do our best for our interview process, okay? So what we're working on is called Acme Solutions. It's a make-believe company, I'm sure. It doesn't really matter about the company. All what we're trying to do is help give you guys a framework on how you would prepare case studies or how you would approach your projects if you are working as a business analyst, okay? So with that, let's get started. This is week 6 of our training. If you have questions, please post them in the comments. I try my best to get back to you in 24 hours. But in any event, if you have any questions about the case study from any past videos as well, please post your questions in the comments below. If this is the first video that you're watching, please go back and watch the other videos so you can understand what we're doing today. And the goal is, again, for me not to do a lot of work up front. I want to do this, everything that I'm gonna talk about, I'll be doing right here with you guys, just so you can understand and ask me questions about, hey, why did you do something? Because I think that's the biggest element, right? In this group, I don't teach you guys the textbook stuff because honestly, it doesn't help that much, right? So when you are working as a business analyst, it's good to have the BABOK or the textbook stuff as general knowledge, right? But typically, when you're working as a business analyst, a lot of those things that are written in the textbook do not apply, right? And they may or they may not, depending on what project you're working on, depending on what organization you're working on. Each organization does things a little differently. So what I teach you is from my practical experience of 15 years. Take it or leave it. I'm trying to do the best I can and help you guys as much as I can. So with that said, let's get started. You will hear my kids in the background. They're kids, so you'll hear them. Let's get started. So I did prepare a PowerPoint presentation, which I've shared the link with you guys in our Facebook group. So if you're wanting to get any of these PowerPoint presentations, even from earlier weeks, as well as this one, you can find those links in our Facebook group, okay? So again, this is week 6 of Acme Solutions. You hear my little one in the background. He's just having a good day, a good time, Saturday morning for us here. So my intro, this is week 6 of Acme Solutions. We're again in the Business Analyst in Demand Facebook group. This video will also be streamed live, not streamed live, but streamed in our YouTube channel as well. So my intro, I've got 15 years managing multi-million-dollar companies for Fortune 50 companies. I've fortunately have been very, very lucky to have worked for some of the biggest companies out there. I have extensive waterfall and agile experience as a business analyst, as well as a project manager. I'm actually certified project manager. So most of the projects I work on or from a PM standpoint, but I love business analysis, and hence I do lots of this training to help you guys within this industry. I'm still working in the field. I still work full time. I do the hands-on approach of teaching you guys and not the textbook stuff, just because anything practical I feel like sticks more than the textbook stuff anyway. So that's another reason why I like to teach based on my experience in the practical arena of this industry rather than what you'll see in the textbook. This case study approach is hands-on. I'm going to do a lot of this stuff with you guys. I need you to pay attention and ask me questions because I've done this a lot of times. So I'll just speed through it just because it's second nature to me. But if you have questions about anything, please ask, because otherwise I won't know where to spend more time on. Okay. So this Acme Solutions, and this is the background that we were given. They want to build, they're a world leader in providing software for the hotel industry. Our customer is Byford Hotels, who's requested us to create a system which allows the following. So this is an app that they're trying to build for their cleaning staff, for their supervisor, and for their admin. The person who have our app, so grammatically this is not correct, but I just copied and pasted what they've given us. So a person who has our app installed on their mobile phone, cleaning staff visits locations and or rooms assigned to him or her to clean the room. Supervisor is a person who verifies the work of the cleaning staff, and an admin is a person who assigns the room or location to the cleaning staff and assign the supervisor to rate the same. So based on our background, these were the requirements that we were supposed to fulfill as part of this case study. So I'll just read it really, really quickly, and then we'll go into the details, okay? So our requirement, and the cleaning staff to start his shift by logging onto the app. They then visit the room or location, which has been assigned to him by the admin. He then starts the timer by selecting the location. He then does the cleaning and fills out a checklist with comments. If any, once done, he submits a report and marks the task complete. So that's what our cleaning staff will be doing. Our supervisor will visit each room or location that's assigned to him or her. They will pull out the details of the staff who cleaned the room. They'll verify the work and assign and read each item. And once done, he finally rates the work. The admin then allocates room and locations to cleaning staff and supervisor. Each cleaning staff and supervisor can service multiple locations / room. And then I think the last requirement is like for the admin to, when the supervisor rates it, then the admin can go ahead and assign the room. So what we're trying to do is to write an SRS document with functional point and wireframes for a web application. So as an output, we're going to be doing some wireframes. We're not going to do an SRS because SRS documents are typically done in the waterfall. I know that Agile is the new approach of doing project management and business analysis. So we're going to do go more into the Agile approach. So what we'll deliver to them instead of an SRS or our user stories, right? And try to break it down into sprint planning and some of that stuff. So whoever is looking at our documentation understands that we not only know how to do business analysis, we also have experience in the Agile industry or the Agile SDLC. Okay. So with that, the framework of the case study. This is something that you guys should be following, whether you're doing a case study or you're working as a business analyst. This is typically what we do as business analysts or when we're managing projects, right, day to day anyway. So the framework of the case study, we document assumptions, right? In a case study, that is extremely important because you don't have stakeholders to validate stuff with, right? Typically, when you're working as a business analyst, you always have a team to help you validate, things and requirements. But in a case study, if you don't have the opportunity to validate anything, document your assumptions. That'll help narrow the scope of what you're trying to build, right? So if you leave the scope really, really, really wide open, it becomes hard to focus on any one individual item. But if you list assumptions, that will hopefully help you narrow the scope a little bit, and then you have an easier time doing workflow diagrams, creating use case diagrams, and then also in writing user stories, right? So that's the goal. We're going to create as is workflow diagrams, which are done by interviewing stakeholders, identifying current pain points, and expected results or enhancements. We're going to create use case diagrams, which are high-level features of our program or our app. We typically document business rules. We create to-be workflow diagrams. We create requirements for future state, which could be user stories, which also include our acceptance criteria. And then we do some level of prototyping, and then we present our case study. I've seen two ways of doing this. Typically, if you're presented to do a case study, they will schedule an interview so you can present that case study to a panel of interviewees or interviewers, actually, or they may just ask you to submit your whatever you've done as a result of the case study. So these are two different things that you could be asked to do, but in the most typical scenario, once you're given a case study, they will schedule an interview for you to come present your body of work that you've done. Okay. So in the last few weeks, we've introed the case study, we've documented assumptions, we've created use case diagrams, we've completed our as is, we've completed our product backlog, we identified our business rules, and we did our workflow, our to-be workflows at a high level. So this week, what I want to focus on, so this week, what I want to focus on is identifying our product backlog and, figuring out which features we're going to be doing our user stories for. So in this week, I want to keep the training short and sweet, maybe I think half an hour, just so it's easier for you guys to consume. And you guys, I've done trainings that have gone for an hour and a half, and those typically, the attention span is just not there. So let's try to keep within the half an hour time frame. So the reason why I want to show you guys our use case diagram, and the next slide is our product backlog, is because when we're trying to write our user stories, this is typically what you would look at, right? So you identify your business rules because they help you write your user stories. Your business rules are kind of like your guarding rails, right? So for things that are doable and things that are not doable in your industry, right? So that's why it's important to document business rules. But typically when you're looking at, we've done our as is workflows, we've done our to-be, we now understand what needs to be built, along with having our use case diagrams. And I think we did our use case diagrams, I think in week 1 or week 2. And which identify high-level functionality that we'll be building for this app, right? So we see our primary actors on the left-hand side, which is going to be our cleaning staff, which is going to be our supervisor and admin or manager. And our secondary actors is going to be the reservation system for the hotel, for example, right? So we identified for our cleaning staff, these are the things that they need to be able to do. For our supervisor, where you see the lines, those are the things they need to do. And for admin and supervisor, these are the things that they need to do. But you see that there are some ovals which are used for like functionality. They have more than one arrows, right? So a cleaning staff needs to do login as well as a supervisor. So you'll see a line from supervisor to the same bubble for login as well as the admin or supervisor. So that tells us that that one functionality needs to be across the board for all of our primary users. So that's why we do use case diagrams to help us simplify what our functionality needs to be and what other touching points need to be there, right? So not only do we need to build that login functionality for our cleaning staff, we also need to build it for our supervisor as well as our admin or / manager. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So from here, so once we identify at a high level our functionality, we then move on to creating our product backlog, which is exactly what we did. I think in week 3 or maybe 2 as well. You'll have to go back and check. Is we looked at all of these items, right? And then we listed them out in the product backlog. So what we'll do this week is once you're working in the agile environment and you have a product backlog that's either given to you by your product owner, or it's created as a collective within the Agile team. So be mindful, the product backlog is typically managed or created by the product owner, but all team members can give input and can provide and add items to the product backlog, right? But it is your product owner that will typically prioritize things that are need to be done earlier, right, to create that MVP, right? So what we're doing typically is once you have a product backlog, we'll identify, or your product owner with the team will try to identify which features need to be done first. Typically, they'll identify them high, medium, or low. And typically, the items that are identified as high, which are typically, none of the bells and whistles, just basic functionality to help you speed to market, right? So Agile typically is software methodology that's used, right? So that you can develop software faster and iteratively, which means that typically where in the waterfall scenario, it would take you a year to 18 months to build everything before you release it. In the Agile environment, the goal is that you build small chunks and you release as you go to to enable you to get to release that product or software faster to the market than you would if you were working in the waterfall scenario. So keep that in mind when we talk about this, right? So the whole goal of Agile is speed to market, so that you build small pieces of functionality iteratively, and that way that you have feedback from your customers, from your users, from your internal teams on how the software is interacting and what the next features should be, okay? So given that we have a product backlog of 13 items, the next things you would do is identify like which ones do you want to work on first, right? So let me exit out of this power presentation mode and we'll start working on this. So right now what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste everything that we have. I will try to just, let me see if I can make the screen bigger now that people have given me feedback about it not being view. Hold on. There we go. Control Alt. Nice. Okay. You see my little one? Oh, that's too big. Okay, and I will remove this panel. Okay, I don't know how to do that. Okay, I think this is good enough. Okay, I think that's big enough. Okay, so typically once we have our product backlog, we'll work with our product owner along with the remaining team, right, to prioritize items on the product backlog. Because from a business standpoint, let's say if your product owner wants to do like 5 things, but technically with our developers and our QA folks on the team and our UX designers, they may say, well, if you need to do these 5 things, you need to do these 2 things technically to make those 5 things possible. So then what may end up happening is if we can only do 5 things, then they'll remove 2 of the business items that are needed, add in our technical items that need to be added to the product backlog. So that way we can have a release that is sustainable, right? That's the goal, is to deliver small chunks of functionality that is technically feasible. So when we prioritize our product backlog, what I've done is I just copied and pasted from what we had, our original product backlog. So here I'll just say, so this is going to be, I'll just bold or maybe highlight the ones that will be high level or things that we're going to be working on first. So high priority at this point. So this one, right? So login is another one that we should provide sooner rather than later. So our staff, admin, and supervisor could log in, right? We want the ability to give them input hours or assign schedule. And then assign staff to rooms and type of cleaning. Let's do create schedule. And let's do, I think that's it. I think that's good enough for now. So as you can see, we went through the list and we identified or we prioritize levels of the functionality that we'll be diving deeper into, right? So typically for a case study, I'm sure they're not requesting you to build out like everything for the system, because that's not something that you would do in a week. Typically, they give you case studies and they give you 1 week to complete them. For you to do documentation and everything would take you a lot longer. So the way that you can circumvent a lot of work upfront is select like we did, prioritize some of the functionality that you'll be diving deeper into, or diving deeper into. Okay, so with that, so these are the things that we prioritize. The next thing to do is we're gonna do break down the product backlog. So I'll copy these again. And now what we typically want to do is, let's see what I did. So I'll just leave the ones, take out the ones that are not on the list. And what we want to do is we want to break them down, right? So there's something called a product backlog, and there's something called a sprint backlog as well. So typically, when we're working in the agile environment, I'm going to make these black because red doesn't look too good. Okay, so typically what we do is we want to be able to break down these features, right? So these features such as login for staff, supervisor, admin, or manager are pretty huge pieces of functionality, right? So what we want to do even before we have our technical staff give us input on some of these is try to break them down, right? So let's say the way that we could break them down, and typically you would do this with your technical staff as a team. So let's say if your product manager comes to you and says, hey, I want these 6 things to be in the first release, which is typically, this is a lot of work. So typically not all of this would go into your first release, but let's see how we could try to break it down. You would be doing this with your technical staff, your developers, your QA staff, because anytime when you're trying to gauge functionality, you also want to know how long it would take to test. So there's 2 components, right? You want to know how long it will take to develop that software functionality, as well as how long it would take to test it. And that way you can determine when you can deliver this piece of functionality to the market. So let's say if we're saying that we want a mobile app that should work on Apple and Android. So first we want to say it needs to be built on Apple iOS platform. And then it also needs to be, and then it also needs to be on Android. So these are 2 different, think of them as Windows and Apples, right? Like, so these are 2 different, so everybody either typically has an Apple phone or Android phone. And for both of these apps to show up in your search console, so you can search for these apps, they need to be registered to Apple as well as Android. So that's what that means, is that when we're doing the coding and we're registering this app, it needs to be on both of those platforms. So when we say we want to input available hours, let's break this down is, well, I think this should be higher priority. So let's say login for supervisor and login So now we could further break this down to say login screens. I'm actually going to remove this one because I want to dive deeper into this one. So along with login, we also need to give them the ability to register, right? Register as staff. So just giving them the screen to log in as the different types of users is not enough. We need to have them register once they log in. So let's say if I'm staff, I need to register on this application to identify, authenticate that I am a staff member that works for this hotel chain, or I am a supervisor that works for this hotel chain, or I am an admin or a manager. So register as staff, register as supervisor, register as admin manager. And then what we also can do is then landing pages, right? So landing pages for staff, landing pages for supervisor. So what that means is what, as a staff, when I log in, what should I be able to do? Obviously, things that I can do as a staff are going to be different for things that a supervisor has the ability to do, right? And same goes for admin slash manager. So if we can identify what those functionalities are, right, as a staff, then we can route somebody who's registered and authenticated as staff onto a landing page that gives them the ability just to maybe input hours and see their schedule. And maybe for a supervisor, they can see their schedule, they can maybe assign rooms to staff, and maybe they can also rate, see what needs to be rated or inspected, for example, right? So that's what I mean when we say we're going to break down this login feature. That's tied to a lot of different things, right? So maybe let's focus on just that instead of anything else for the remainder of this case study. So I'll remove this because I feel like we have a lot of things to focus on just with login, right? Because there's so many things that are tied to this particular functionality that we can be writing user stories for and delivering it as part of our case study. Okay, so the next thing that I'd like to talk about is the next thing we're going to start doing once we know what our high priority items are. So these are it, right? What we're going to now do is start writing user stories. So for the duration of this training, what I think I want to do is give you a template of how we rate user stories and the acceptance criteria. And then next week, when we meet week 7, it'll be to write user stories for these functionalities that we have been talking about. Okay, so here's a template that we typically use in the Agile industry to write user stories. So as a user, I want X functionality so that I can achieve some goal. So the acceptance criteria is given some context when some action is carried out, then a set of observable outcomes should occur, right? So when we talk about this, a user is typically a stakeholder or customer focused. The functionality is the desired action, and justification, I think justification is aligned to achieve some goal, right? So we're setting parameters and or values for what that person or user is doing. And then the acceptance criteria becomes the testing purposes for testing purposes used to create the test scripts for cases. So just as an example, so we looked at this case study, right? User story template. So as a user, I want functionality so that I can achieve some goal. And the acceptance criteria is given some context when some action is carried out, then a set of observable outcomes should occur. So in our example here, so we'll do this, we'll deep dive next week in writing user stories. But for example, let's take this one, the login screen for staff, right? So we can say, as staff of, I forget, Acme Solutions, I want the ability to log in so that I can check my schedule, right? And the acceptance criteria would be something like, given that I can log in to whatever app, this is the app that we're building, given that that I log in when I go to the home screen, then I can click on my schedule and see which days working next week. Okay, so in writing a user story in this way, it becomes very clear. So it's from a user standpoint, right? That's the whole goal of Agile. It's very user focused, user centric, right? So it's written from a user standpoint. But when a developer or a, a QA, like our quality assurance testers, read this, they know exactly what the desired functionality is, so they can code to that functionality. And given, looking at this user story, they can give accurate assessments on how long it would take them to code it as well as test it. So now when we write user stories in this format, it becomes very clear to our technical folks um, and our product owners how long this piece of functionality will take. So let's say our staff, our technical staff says, okay, this can take me like maybe a day to code. And our QA folks can say, okay, this particular user story can take us, another 1 day to test, right? Because we have to test all these different scenarios around it. Then when we're building out our sprint, right, our sprint backlog, we know how much capacity or how many user stories we can fit into a sprint because we have high level estimates, right, for our user stories. So that's the whole goal of Agile. It's very user centric. We know how long each functionality will take. We can prioritize which functionality should go to market first, and we can also test it iteratively, meaning that if we release the software and we find a bug or something, and or our users or our staff come back and say, hey, it would be great if I can put in a request for my schedule next week. So that becomes another feature that goes onto the product backlog. We as a team prioritize it and figure out when it could go into which one of our releases it could go into, right? It could go into the next sprint release if if the work hasn't started, or it could go into maybe in the next several sprints. All depends on how we as a team prioritize this. And I understand with this case study, again, it's a land of make believe. So we're going to make assumptions that the functionality that we identified, these things that are highlighted, are going to be our MVP functionality, which is going to be the things that we focus on for this case study. Okay. I hope this training was helpful. In week 7, this was week 6 training. In week 7, we'll spend the whole session writing our user stories. So that way you guys get into the practice of writing user stories and are feeling comfortable and confident in them. And I think after that, we can do some prototyping in week 8. I also want to show you how to do some release planning. While I'll have to think about that. It's not something that is typically required as part of a case study, but I think it's good for you guys to know anyway. So leave me comments. Let me know if you'd like me to go into how releases and how sprints are planned in the Agile environment. And I'm happy to just go dive deep into that as well. But again, give me input. Let me know if you have any questions. Give me input and let me know if you have any questions. I hope you found this helpful. If again, if you have questions, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to, cover other topics within the business analyst realm as well. Lots of people have asked me to do additional case studies, and I'm happy to do that as soon as this one's done. I typically provide live training once a week. And that's my goal to you guys. That's my goal internally to you guys. So let me know other topics you'd like to learn about. Let me know other case studies you'd like to do. And I'm happy to help you guys and to do them together. Again, hope you found this helpful. I wish you have a great rest of the day and great rest of the weekend. With that, I'll see you guys next week. And again, I'll post the links in the group for you guys to review and to use as guiding principles for any case studies or any work that you're doing in the business analyst domain. All right, bye.